In the outskirts of Kyoto, there stands a shrine that locals avoid once the sun begins to fall. By daylight, it looks peaceful, stone lanterns lining the path, moss-covered statues bowing silently beneath towering cedars. Tourists sometimes wander in, snapping photos of the torii gate glowing crimson against the sky. But when dusk arrives, the shrine changes. The cicadas grow silent, the lanterns flicker though no flame is inside, and those who linger past sunset say the shadows themselves begin to breathe. The villagers whisper, "Never step inside after the sky turns red." The shrine does not welcome visitors at dusk. If you enter at that hour, you may hear the sound of Geta sandals clacking against the stone path behind you. Even when no one is there, you may smell incense burning, though no candles are lit, and if you bow to the shrine, you may hear someone bow back. Some call it the home of a forgotten deity. Others say it is haunted by the spirits of priests buried alive during a purge centuries ago. But all agree on one thing: if the shrine acknowledges you at dusk, you will never walk back the same. The story begins with Kenji Sato, a graduate student in Tokyo who specialized in Japanese folklore. His research focused on places where myth bled into history, shrines, temples, and forgotten rituals. To him, ghost stories were not warnings but artifacts, cultural echoes that could be studied, written about, and eventually published in his dissertation. During the summer, Kenji traveled across Japan visiting rural shrines and recording their legends. One evening, he arrived in a quiet Kyoto neighborhood just as the sun began to dip behind the mountains. His host, an elderly innkeeper named Mr. Takahashi, gave him a gentle but firm warning as he checked in. "You can walk anywhere you like during the day, but when dusk falls, do not go near the old shrine at the edge of the cedar forest. People who go there at twilight do not always return." Kenji smiled politely. He had heard similar warnings before, villagers protecting their children with ghost stories. He thanked Mr. Takahashi, but in his notebook, he wrote a single line: "Visit shrine at dusk." The next day, he toured the city, losing track of time among the markets and temples. By the time he reached the cedar forest, the sun was already dissolving into a river of red and gold. The path was quiet, eerily so. Even the birds had stilled their wings. Ahead, framed by the thickening shadows, stood the torii gate, its paint cracked but still burning crimson in the fading light. Stone lanterns lined the path, covered in moss, their hollow mouths gaping dark. The deeper he walked, the heavier the silence grew, pressing against his ears until he felt deafened by it. He paused halfway, adjusting his camera. Through the lens, the forest seemed darker than it should have been, as though the shadows swallowed the light more eagerly here. At last, he reached the shrine itself, a modest wooden structure, weathered but intact, its roof sagging under centuries of rain. Incense bowls sat empty, yet the air carried the sharp, unmistakable scent of smoke. Kenji frowned. He looked around. No one else was there. And yet, he had the strange feeling that he was no longer alone. Kenji adjusted his glasses, trying to shake off the strange tension in the air. Shrines often carried atmospheres of reverence and silence. Perhaps he was simply more tired than he realized. Yet something in the air felt wrong. The cicadas had gone silent. Not one bird called from the trees. The forest was mute, as though holding its breath. He stepped closer to the main hall. His shoes scraped the stone path, and the sound echoed louder than it should have, bouncing back from the wooden beams as if the shrine were empty inside, hollow like a chest cavity. At the steps, he stopped. A faint sound reached him. Clack, clack, clack. The distinct tapping of wooden Geta sandals on stone. He turned sharply, expecting to see another visitor. But the path behind him was empty. The gate distant and still. The sound ceased. Kenji's heartbeat quickened. He pulled out his recorder, whispering notes into it. Strange auditory phenomena. Possible trick of acoustics. His voice quivered more than he wanted. He bowed politely toward the shrine, more out of habit than belief. The moment he bent forward, the boards creaked inside the hall. Another bow answered his own. His breath caught in his throat. Straightening quickly, he scanned the hall. No one, just shadows pressing between the pillars. But the smell of incense grew stronger, curling into his nostrils. He looked down. The bowls on the altar were still empty, untouched by ash, yet wisps of smoke rose faintly in the dim light. Kenji stepped up onto the wooden platform. His weight made the boards groan. Yet beneath that sound, another echoed, a second groan, out of sync with his steps, as if another set of feet walked just beside him. The air grew cold. He rubbed his arms, looking around. His camera lens fogged slightly, though the evening was warm. Wiping it clear, he raised it toward the altar. Through the viewfinder, he froze. The shrine was no longer empty. Rows of figures knelt on the wooden floor, backs straight, heads bowed, priests in white robes, their faces obscured by hoods. They were silent, unmoving, a congregation locked in eternal prayer. Kenji lowered the camera. The room was empty again. He raised it, full. Lowered it, empty. His stomach lurched, bile burning his throat. The sound of the Geta sandals returned, circling him now, clacking softly against the boards though no one walked there. He spun in place, but the sound only shifted. Always behind him, always just out of sight. Hallucination, he whispered, his voice trembling. Fatigue, but deep inside, he knew this was no trick of his mind. The shrine was not abandoned. It was inhabited by something that refused to be seen directly. Something that remembered rituals long forgotten. Then the chanting began, faint at first, a low murmur rising from the floor. His recorder in his hand buzzed, its red light blinking rapidly as if struggling to capture the sound. He recognized the rhythm, Shinto prayers, but the words were twisted, fragmented, stretched too long. They echoed like voices dragged through water. Kenji stumbled back toward the steps. The sandals clacked louder, faster, chasing him. He broke into a run, nearly tripping as he rushed down the path toward the Torii gate. His breaths came in ragged gasps, each one carrying the heavy scent of incense. At the gate, he stopped to look back. The shrine stood still in the fading twilight, silent once more. No sandals, no chanting, just the wooden hall bathed in shadows. And yet, when he raised his camera one last time, he saw them again, dozens of priests kneeling, heads turning slowly toward him in unison. Their faces were blank, their mouths stretched wide, whispering words he could not understand. Kenji lowered the camera with shaking hands, bile sour in his mouth. The image of faceless priests clung to his vision, burned into the back of his eyes like an afterimage. He told himself to leave, to get back to the inn, write his notes, pretend it was nothing more than exhaustion. But curiosity was a trap he had walked into too many times before. And this time, it would not let him go. The air around the shrine grew denser, heavy like water pressing against his body. He turned back toward the path, but the Torii gate looked impossibly far now. The distance stretched as if the forest had rearranged itself. Each step forward only seemed to drag him deeper. A wind rose suddenly, though the trees did not sway. It carried the sharp smell of incense, mixed with something metallic, iron, or perhaps blood. Kenji covered his mouth, coughing, and stumbled back toward the steps of the shrine. His recorder buzzed in his pocket, hissing with static, though he had turned it off. The Geta sandals clacked again. Louder now, echoing on both sides of him. He spun left, nothing. Right, empty. But the sound didn't stop. It grew into a circle, closing around him. He raised his flashlight, its beam cutting through the mist that now curled between the trees. The light struck something, fabric. For a split second, a figure stood at the edge of the clearing, dressed in a priest's white robe. The hood covered its face, but its head tilted, acknowledging him. Kenji blinked, and the figure was gone. The sandals, however, marched closer, circling tighter until it felt as though invisible priests walked shoulder to shoulder around him. Then the chanting returned, louder, clearer, a dozen voices rising from the ground itself, vibrating through the wood, through his bones. Kenji stumbled back onto the shrine's platform, clutching his ears, but the sound drilled straight into his skull. The floor beneath him shifted. His flashlight beam revealed cracks opening in the wood, black voids stretching like mouths. From the gaps, smoke seeped upward, thick and pungent, carrying the acrid smell of burning flesh. His heart hammered. He stumbled toward the altar, desperate for some sign, some explanation. The empty bowls now brimmed with ash, red embers glowing faintly within them. The smoke curled upward, forming faint shapes, faces contorted in silent screams. Kenji gasped, stepping back. His heel struck something solid. Slowly, he turned. A priest stood behind him. Its robe was pristine, white as bone, the hood drawn low, where its face should have been. There was nothing but blackness. The figure raised its hand in slow, deliberate motion, palm open as if in blessing. Kenji froze, his breath trapped in his throat. The figure's head tilted, and from the darkness of its hood, a whisper slithered out. "You bowed, now bow again." Kenji stumbled backward, nearly toppling off the platform. More figures emerged from the shadows, robes pale against the encroaching dark. They lined the hall, kneeling, then rising in unison, their movements too synchronized to be human, their whispers layered into one voice. "Bo, Bo, Bo." He shook his head violently. "No, no." His voice cracked. The priests stepped forward, their sandals clacking against the wood, the sound deafening. Their hands reached outward, skeletal and gray, skin stretched tight, fingers too long. Kenji scrambled down the steps, nearly falling as he hit the stone path. He sprinted toward the torii gate, the chanting pursuing him, echoing inside his skull. But no matter how far he ran, the gate never drew closer. The path stretched endlessly, folding upon itself. His breaths tore ragged through his chest. But the shrine loomed still behind him, never receding. He stopped, collapsing to his knees, gasping. The chanting swelled, louder than ever, until it was no longer voices but thunder. The ground trembled, the trees groaned, the air itself vibrated, and then, silence. Kenji lifted his head slowly. The forest was empty. The shrine behind him sat still, quiet, as though nothing had happened. The gate stood ahead, finally within reach. Relief flooded him. He staggered forward, but when he raised his camera one last time to confirm, his stomach turned to ice. The path was gone. The torii gate had vanished. Only rows of priests remained, standing shoulder to shoulder, stretching into the forest like an army of the dead. Every hood turned toward him in unison. And this time, he didn't need the camera to see them. Kenji's legs shook beneath him. The forest was gone, swallowed by rows of hooded priests. The torii gate, the exit, had vanished. Only the shrine remained behind him, glowing faintly as if the wood itself burned from within. Dozens of heads bowed toward him in perfect unison, the sound of their robes brushing the earth like 100 whispers. Then, slowly, the priests straightened again. their movements rigid, mechanical. One stepped forward, its hood lifted slightly, revealing not a face but a hollow mask of cracked porcelain. Two black holes stared out where eyes should have been. The mouth split open, not carved but torn, stretching impossibly wide. From it came a sound like 1,000 voices layered together. "You disturbed the dusk." Kenji stumbled back, clutching his notebook like a shield. His mind raced. He remembered Takahashi's words at the inn. People who go there at twilight do not return. Dusk wasn't just a time of day, it was a threshold. This shrine belonged neither to the world of the living nor to the dead. At sunset, the veil thinned, and those who lingered were claimed. His hand trembled as he flipped through his notes, searching for context. Weeks ago, in an archive, he had read about a purge during the Edo period. Local daimyo feared rebellion from shrine priests who opposed the destruction of sacred groves. Dozens of priests were executed, buried alive beneath their own altar. Official records claimed they were relocated, but whispers said otherwise. The revelation chilled him. The priests had not left. They had been entombed in the shrine itself. Centuries later, their devotion had curdled into rage. Every dusk, they replayed their rituals, not for gods, but for themselves, and any living soul who witnessed them became part of the congregation. Kenji's breath hitched as another priest advanced, its robe dragging across the stone path. Its hands emerged from the sleeves, skeletal. Skin like parchment stretched thin. It raised a rusted bell, shaking at once. The sound pierced the air, vibrating through Kenji's bones. The chorus began again. Bo, bo, bo. Kenji shook his head, his voice breaking. "I'm not part of this. I don't belong here." The lead priest tilted its head. From the void of its hood, ash drifted downward, scattering like dust over the path. The voice thundered once more. "You bowed once. You acknowledged us. Now you are ours." Kenji's stomach twisted. He remembered the small bow he had given when he first entered. Habit. Respect. Nothing more. But to them, it had been acceptance. He had agreed to join their ritual. The realization hit with crushing weight. There was no escape. Not by running. Not by denial. The shrine had marked him. He fell to his knees, the chanting battering his ears. His notebook slipped from his hands, pages scattering across the stones. His recorder clicked on by itself, red light blinking. Through the static, his own voice played back, strange auditory phenomena, possible trick of acoustics. Then, beneath it, another voice answered, a whisper he hadn't recorded at all. "Not trick, not sound. We are here." Kenji clutched his head, tears stinging his eyes. He had come seeking folklore, but what he found was history carved into the earth with blood. The shrine was no myth, no legend, it was a prison, and he had unlocked its door simply by stepping inside at the wrong hour. All around him, the priests raised their hands in unison, palms open, as though preparing to drag him into their endless dusk. Kenji tried to scream, but his throat locked tight, strangled by the weight of the chanting. The sound rose from the shrine, from the forest, from beneath the ground itself, like the entire land had become a mouth. The priests advanced, their sandals striking in perfect rhythm. Clack, clack, clack. The air thickened, heavy as tar, pressing against his chest. He staggered backward, stumbling over his own scattered notes. His recorder buzzed violently, spitting static mixed with muffled prayers in a language he half recognized yet could not follow. The lead priest stepped closer, raising its porcelain mask toward him. The cracked surface shifted unnaturally, jaw opening wider than bone should allow. From its mouth spilled smoke, black and thick, twisting into shapes of kneeling figures. They surrounded Kenji, bowing, rising, bowing again, their movements endless. Bo. The voices thundered. Kenji shook his head violently, tears streaking his face. No. His shout echoed, weak and small against their chorus. The priests did not pause. Their hoods turned in unison, and one extended a skeletal hand. Fingers impossibly long, they brushed against his shoulder. His body went cold, every muscle locking as though he had been dipped in ice water. The world shifted. Suddenly, Kenji was inside the shrine's hall, kneeling among the priests. His notebook and recorder were gone. His body bowed without his consent, spine bending forward in perfect rhythm with the congregation. Panic screamed inside him, but his limbs betrayed him. The hall was full now, lanterns blazing with unnatural flame. Ash fell like snow from the ceiling. He glanced sideways. The priests around him turned their heads slowly, revealing the hollow darkness inside their hoods. One leaned closer, whispering, its breath cold as winter. "You are with us." Kenji tried to rise, but invisible weight crushed him down. His knees dug into the wooden floor, splinters stabbing his skin. His hands folded, his mouth opened, and a prayer he had never learned poured out in a voice not his own. The words scraped his throat raw, yet he could not stop. The lead priest moved to the altar, lifting the rusted bell. It rang once. The sound shattered through Kenji's skull, splintering thought from thought. In its wake, images flooded him, priests buried alive, their screams sealed beneath wood and soil, nails tearing at coffins, silence stretching for centuries, and then, rage, endless, festering rage. Kenji screamed, his own voice lost inside the chant. "Please, I don't belong here." The lead priest turned, ash spilling from its sleeves. "You bowed, you breathe, now you remain." The floor cracked beneath him, the board splitting open like ribs. From the void rose pale arms, hands clawing at his legs, dragging him downward. He kicked, fought, but the grip was iron. His knees sank into the gap, then his thighs. The chanting grew frenzied, faster, louder, until it became a single, endless roar. Kenji's eyes darted to the altar. For a moment, he thought he saw a chance, an old bell rope swaying faintly. Legend said one could break a shrine's curse by calling the kami. Demanding judgment, with the last of his strength, he lunged forward, ripping free of skeletal hands long enough to seize the rope. He pulled. The bell above boomed, the sound deafening. The priests froze. For one breathless second, silence fell. Then the air exploded. The priests shrieked, their hoods snapping backward, revealing hollow sockets filled with fire. Their robes thrashed as though alive, whipping the air. The altar split, spilling ash and bones. The ground beneath the shrine convulsed like a living thing, tossing Kenji across the hall. He crawled toward the steps, lungs seared by smoke. Behind him, the congregation wailed, voices twisting into words that clawed at his mind. "Join us! Join us! Join us!" Kenji hurled himself down the stairs, hitting the stone path hard. His ankle twisted, pain flaring hot, but he kept crawling. The torii gate shimmered ahead, distant yet visible now, glowing faintly against the night. The priests surged after him, sandals striking in thunderous unison. The chanting rose again, shaking the earth. Kenji dragged himself forward, every muscle screaming. He reached the gate, fingers scraping the base of the pillar. For one agonizing moment, the world held still. Then, as his body collapsed through the torii, the sound cut off. Silence. He lay sprawled on the ground outside the shrine's boundary, gasping, clutching at the dirt like it was the only real thing left. Behind him, the gate stood tall and red, the shrine shrouded in shadows. The chanting was gone, the priests had vanished, but the smell of incense lingered. Kenji wept, his body shaking, his mind fractured by what he had seen. He had escaped, but a truth gnawed inside him. The shrine had let him go, not out of mercy, but because it had marked him. He had bowed once, he belonged to it now. Kenji made it back to the inn long after midnight, limping, his ankles swollen, his clothes coated with dust and ash. Mr. Takahashi's eyes widened when he saw him, but the old man said nothing. He only bowed his head slightly, as if in mourning, and left Kenji to collapse on his futon. For days, Kenji could not speak of what happened. He told himself it was exhaustion, hallucination, a stress-born nightmare, but each night, as he tried to sleep, the silence pressed too heavily against his ears. He could still hear it, the faint clack of wooden sandals pacing outside his door. Sometimes, the smell of incense seeped into his room, curling through the air though no candles burned. When he played back the recordings from his device, his heart nearly stopped. His own notes were there. Yes, his shaky voice describing sounds and visions. But beneath them was something else, a layered chanting, soft but steady, repeating the same word over and over. Bo, Bo, Bo. Kenji returned to Tokyo weeks later, but the shrine never left him. In lectures, he heard sandals in the hallways. In the library, he smelled smoke drifting between shelves. Once, while grading papers, he looked up and saw ashes falling faintly onto his desk, then vanishing before they touched the wood. The worst was the mirror. One morning, as he shaved, the steam on the glass cleared just enough for him to see behind his reflection. Dozens of hooded figures stood crowded in the small bathroom, their porcelain masks cracked, their heads tilted toward him. He spun around, empty. Still, the image clung like a stain. Kenji never told anyone the full truth. He finished his thesis, though he omitted the shrine entirely. But he knew the bond remained. He had bowed once, the priests had seen him, and one day, when dusk fell again, they would call him back. Ghost stories are not always about monsters. Sometimes, they are about memory, about promises made and broken, about rituals that outlive the people who once performed them. The shrine Kenji entered was never abandoned. It was silenced, buried under time, but silence is not the same as peace. At dusk, when the sun bleeds into the horizon, the veil between worlds thins. The priests entombed within the shrine had been wronged, erased not only from life but from history. Their devotion, their prayers, their final cries did not vanish. They fermented into something endless. Every evening, as shadows stretch long, they rise to demand what was denied them: acknowledgement. Kenji's mistake was simple. He bowed once. He treated the shrine with respect, the way he would any sacred site. But in doing so, he crossed a line he could not uncross. To the dead, acknowledgement is invitation, ritual is binding. Perhaps the story's lesson is this: reverence without understanding is dangerous. We tread lightly on the past, but sometimes lightly is not enough. Some places demand more than respect, they demand distance. So if you find yourself in Japan, wandering through cedars as dusk descends, and you see a crimson torii glowing against the fading light, remember the warning. Do not bow, do not listen, and above all, do not linger past sunset, because once the shrine answers, it will never forget you.